In this video, we're going to take a look at monopolistic competition. It's the last of our four market structures, and before we begin, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the basics involved with it. So it's kind of a hybrid between monopoly and perfect competition, and it's going to share a lot in common with both of those market structures. And I'll kind of identify where it shares things and where it differs. But the first thing that you need to know is that there's many firms, and we're talking about thousands of firms, maybe hundreds to thousands, but not as many as perfect competition. And because of that, these firms are going to have some ability to set the price, but they're going to be, we're going to say, low barriers to entry and exit. So very low barriers to entry and exit. And what we're going to find is that in so doing, their market graphs are going to look a lot like artificial monopoly, but they're going to behave differently from the short run here and the long run. So that's where we're going to see a difference from monopoly. Now, they also are going to engage in product differentiation. They're going to do some branding and some advertising, some of the things that oligopolies do. But they're not going to engage in tacit collusion or cartels. So no cartels. And that's because they won't do these things because there are too many firms. So we find that restaurants, clothing stores, grocery chains, there are too many firms for them to be able to collude, but they are still going to get some strategic decision making in terms of advertising and marketing behaviors. So marketing is still a key concept for monopolistically competitive firms. Now, first we're going to look at what they look like in the short run. And in the short run, they could be in an equilibrium, actually. So realistically, we could say they could be in this equilibrium that we'll graph later in the short run. But we know that oftentimes what we're going to see is them in a short run earning a profit or a loss. So we're going to draw the two pictures here, price, quantity, and we're not going to have a market graph for monopolistic competition. Even though this graph that we're drawing is really the firm, we're just going to get away with saying that in general we can say that the firms will assume have the same cost structures as one another. We know that's not true in reality, but we could get away with kind of making that assumption. Now, the demand and the marginal revenue are going to be separated because from the firm's perspective, there's not enough firms to make it such that their demand curve is going to be that horizontal Mr. Darp. So for them, in order to sell an additional unit, they're going to have to lower the price. So that's an understanding here, is that they still have that separated Mr. Darp that comes separated down. Now, because it's a normal-looking firm, we're going to have an upward sloping marginal cost curve that's equal to supply for both of them, right? Losses and profits. And just like every other firm, they're going to profit maximize at MR equals MC, and they're going to price at the demand curve. Okay? So they profit maximize at the quantity where MR equals MC, and they price on the demand curve. Now, we need a ATC to determine the profit and the loss. And we know that in a loss, the price is less than the ATC at QF. And we know that in a profit, that price is greater than ATC. Price is greater than ATC at QF. So at this point, we kind of identify where's QF, and we say, okay, that means that the ATC has to come down, hit its minimum at marginal cost, and come back up again. And here, at this point, is where we can find our profit rectangle. Now notice, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here, that the point here is not the minimum of ATC, right? Not the minimum. So this is not a productively efficient firm, nor is it actually allocative efficient, right? We can imagine here is some deadweight loss. Now, when we talk about deadweight loss, we usually refer to it as a market failure. And in this context, there's not an allocatively efficient quantity of whatever is this market. We might say maybe this is upscale pasta restaurants in Clayton, where we are. And this is upscale pasta restaurants. Well, there's not the allocatively efficient quantity, that would be here. There's not the allocatively efficient quantity of upscale pasta meals. But the government is not going to regulate the price of upscale pasta meals because in so doing it would reduce the variety of products that these firms will sell. So governments will accept to some degree the existence of deadweight loss in these types of monopolistically competitive markets. So they don't regulate them. Instead, they say it's the price of variety. Now for this second one, we're going to zoom out just a little so you can see here the difference, and we know that the price is going to be below the ATC, so we're going to come down, hit our minimum, and come back up again. And at QF, ATC is way up high. So that tells us that the firm is earning a loss. Now we can also observe that we're still not productively efficient. We're not at minimum ATC, and we still have some deadweight loss here because we're not allocatively efficient where supply equals demand. But again, we're not going to regulate a monopolistically competitive firm in that way. Now, the last part of what we're going to talk about with monopolistic competition is this. Going back to the beginning really quick. They have some ability to set the price, but there's low barriers to entry and exit. We know that very frequently restaurants will open and close, right? And so imagine yourself operating a restaurant in a market where you are earning economic profit, just like what we have here. And you have lots of economic profit, and then it's relatively easy to open new restaurants. When that occurs, when that kind of situation happens, other restaurateurs will open restaurants. And in so doing, some of your customers will go away. When that happens, your demand curve for your firm is going to shift in. So it's going to come in, and it'll go whoop, just in until it just touches that ATC line. Now it's a little bit hard to see because of all the shading, but the opposite will happen here. If you had a market where firms were losing money, restaurants were losing money, some of them would close, and when that happens, the customers that went to the ones that closed would shift over to the ones that aren't closed. And so the demand would rise for the firms that survive. So demand would shift to the right, and eventually it would come and just touch the ATC. Demand would be a tangent line to the ATC. So it's a little hard to show that shift. So instead we usually have you just redraw the graph, show demand equals the price, marginal revenue, and your marginal cost. And then we know they produce here that MR equals MC. And they price up on the demand curve. And what will happen is that demand curve, this one, will move to the right until it's just tangent to the ATC. So it'll just kind of look like one of these. Come down, tangent, keep going down, hit the minimum, and then come back up again. Now, it may not be a pretty picture, right? But that's the minimum of ATC, but it's going to get us by. So this is an intercept where the P equals the ATC at QF. And I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see this really clearly. It's still not at the minimum of ATC. And I know that ATC looks a little wonky the way I've drawn it, but it'll get you where you need to be. So it's not productively efficient, and there's still some deadweight loss. But what we'd find is that this firm is breaking even, and now we've achieved a long-run equilibrium. So at this point, there's a little bit down here about that efficiency piece, but hopefully this helps you understanding monopolistic competition, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.